In a twist that feels almost too dramatic for reality, the prosecutor has become the prosecuted. The Attorney General, who built a career confronting one of the most powerful men in America, now stands on the other side of the courtroom door. How did the hunter become the hunted? And what does this reversal mean for justice itself? Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, made headlines for years as she investigated and prosecuted former President Donald Trump. She led high-profile cases against his business empire, accusing him of fraud and financial misconduct. Her office secured a civil judgment worth hundreds of millions of dollars against Trump and his organization. Now, in a stunning reversal, James herself faces an indictment. Federal prosecutors have accused her of misconduct related to campaign finance violations and alleged misuse of her prosecutorial authority for political purposes. The charges emerged in early October 2025, sending shockwaves through legal and political circles across the nation. This isn't just another political scandal. It's a moment that tests how Americans view accountability, power, and the pursuit of justice when the roles suddenly flip. Letitia James was elected New York Attorney General in 2018, becoming the first African-American woman to hold the position. She ran on a platform that explicitly promised to investigate Donald Trump, a move that generated both fierce support and sharp criticism. Her opponents called it politicizing the law. Her supporters called it accountability. In 2019, her office began investigating the Trump Organization for potential fraud. The inquiry examined whether Trump inflated property values to secure favorable loans while deflating them to reduce tax bills. By 2022, the civil lawsuit was filed. Documents, depositions, and expert testimony piled up over months. In February 2024, a New York judge ruled against Trump, ordering him and his company to pay over $450 million in penalties. Trump called it a witch hunt. James called it justice. The case became a defining moment in her career and a flashpoint in America's deep political divide. But behind the scenes, another investigation was quietly building. Federal authorities began examining James's own campaign finances in late 2023, according to sources familiar with the matter. Questions emerged about donations, donor coordination, and whether her prosecutorial decisions were improperly influenced by political motivations. By summer 2025, a grand jury had been convened. On October 8, 2025, the indictment was unsealed. James was charged with 2 counts of campaign finance violations and 1 count of abuse of prosecutorial discretion under a rarely used federal statute. The charges alleged she coordinated with political operatives to target Trump in exchange for financial support, and that she misused state resources for campaign purposes. James immediately denied all wrongdoing, calling the charges politically motivated retaliation. According to the indictment documents, federal prosecutors allege that James received improper campaign contributions totaling approximately $1.2 million from donors with explicit interest in seeing Trump prosecuted. The indictment cites email exchanges, text messages, and testimony from former campaign staffers. One message, dated March 2021, allegedly shows James discussing prosecution strategy with a major donor before charges were filed. Prosecutors also allege that James used State Attorney General office resources, including staff time and official communications, to coordinate with her political campaign. A forensic audit reportedly found dozens of instances where state employees worked on campaign materials during official hours. The Department of Justice confirmed these allegations in a press conference, but emphasized that charges represent accusations, not proven facts. James's legal team issued a forceful response. Her attorney, Benjamin Crump, stated that every action taken by the Attorney General's office followed proper legal protocols. He called the timing suspicious, noting it comes as Trump faces multiple trials and mounting legal pressure. Crump described the charges as a transparent attempt to intimidate prosecutors who dare to hold powerful people accountable. Independent legal experts have offered mixed assessments. Some note that the campaign finance allegations, if proven, would represent serious misconduct. Others point out that the abuse of prosecutorial discretion charge is exceptionally rare and difficult to prove. It requires showing not just that a prosecutor made controversial decisions, but that those decisions were made with corrupt intent rather than legitimate legal judgment. The evidence remains contested. No recordings or videos have been released. Much depends on how juries and judges interpret emails, financial records, and witness testimony that could support multiple narratives. Supporters of James argue this indictment is pure retaliation orchestrated by Trump allies within the federal system. They point to Trump's public statements promising to prosecute his political enemies if he returned to power. They note that several people involved in the investigation have past connections to Republican political operations. To them, this looks like weaponization of the justice system, precisely what James was accused of doing. Critics of James, however, argue that no prosecutor should be above the law, regardless of who they've prosecuted. They contend that if James did coordinate her legal strategy with political donors or misuse state resources, those actions would undermine the integrity of every case she's touched. They say this isn't about politics, but about maintaining ethical standards for everyone who wields prosecutorial power. There are significant gaps in public knowledge. The full evidence hasn't been released. Key witnesses haven't testified publicly. We don't know what the grand jury heard that convinced them to indict. We don't know if there are other investigations running parallel to this one. We don't know whether plea negotiations have occurred behind closed doors. Some observers also question the timing. The indictment comes during a presidential election cycle when Trump remains a central figure. That timing could be coincidence, strategy, or something else entirely. Without access to internal deliberations, the public is left to interpret shadows and incomplete information. For Letitia James, the personal cost is immediate and profound. A career built on public service and legal advocacy now hangs in uncertainty. She faces potential prison time, disbarment, and the destruction of her professional reputation. Beyond the legal consequences, there's the human weight of being publicly accused, investigated, and prosecuted in the same spotlight she once controlled. For the people who worked on her team, uncertainty ripples outward. Career prosecutors in her office now face questions about their own decisions and motivations. Some may be called as witnesses. Others may see their cases reviewed or challenged. The institutional trust that allows prosecutors to do their work effectively has been shaken. For New York residents, this story raises uncomfortable questions about who was really serving justice. If the allegations are true, it means the state's top law enforcement officer betrayed public trust. If they're false, it means the federal system can be turned against state officials for political purposes. Either way, faith in the system takes damage. For Trump and his supporters, this moment feels like vindication after years of what they perceived as persecution. For James's supporters, it feels like intimidation and the silencing of accountability. Both groups are watching to see what this means for future prosecutions, future elections, and the fragile norms that keep power in check. This case sits at the intersection of three powerful forces: law, politics, and public trust. Think of the justice system like a scale that only works when people believe it's balanced. When prosecutors charge powerful figures, they must be seen as acting from legal duty, not political desire. When prosecutors themselves face charges, the same standard applies. Legal scholars point to this as a test of prosecutorial accountability. In America, prosecutors have enormous power. They decide who gets charged, what evidence to pursue, and how aggressively to seek punishment. That power is checked by ethics rules, oversight boards, and ultimately by the possibility of prosecution if they abuse their authority. But prosecuting prosecutors is exceptionally rare because it risks chilling legitimate law enforcement. The deeper question is whether American institutions can handle what comes next. If every prosecutor who brings charges against political figures then faces retaliatory prosecution themselves, the message is clear. Only the safest, most cautious cases should be pursued. High-profile accountability becomes too dangerous. But if prosecutors can truly act with impunity, coordinating with political allies and targeting enemies without consequence, then the law becomes just another weapon in partisan warfare. Historians note parallels to other moments when legal systems became arenas for political combat. Rome during its late republic, Weimar Germany, post-Soviet Russia. The pattern is similar. Opposing factions use courts and prosecutors to weaken each other until the system itself collapses under the weight of distrust. America isn't there yet, but this case represents another stress test of institutions that feel increasingly fragile. Here's what we know for certain. Letitia James prosecuted Donald Trump through civil proceedings that resulted in massive financial penalties. She now faces federal criminal charges related to campaign finance and prosecutorial conduct. Both sides claim political motivation from the other. What we don't know is even larger. We don't know the full evidence. We don't know whether the charges will survive legal challenges. We don't know what other investigations might be unfolding in sealed proceedings. We don't know how juries will view competing narratives of accountability versus retaliation. The stage is set for a legal battle that will shape how Americans think about power, prosecution, and political justice for years to come. In the near term, James will likely file motions to dismiss the charges, arguing prosecutorial immunity and First Amendment protections. Legal experts give this strategy a medium chance of success. Federal judges tend to defer to prosecutorial decisions, but they also scrutinize charges against other prosecutors with extra care. Expect preliminary hearings within 60 to 90 days. If the case proceeds to trial, it probably won't begin until mid-2026 at the earliest. Grand jury proceedings could expand to include additional defendants or charges. There's a medium to high probability that other investigations will surface, either supporting James's defense or revealing additional alleged misconduct. The discovery process alone could take months. Politically, this story will dominate news cycles during the presidential campaign. Trump will almost certainly reference it repeatedly as evidence of his persecution claims being validated. Democratic candidates will face difficult questions about whether they support James or believe she should step aside. The New York governor has the power to remove her from office, but faces intense political pressure from both directions. That decision seems unlikely before more evidence becomes public, giving it a low confidence rating in the immediate term. In the long term, this case may establish new precedents about when and how prosecutors can be prosecuted for their prosecutorial decisions. Legal scholars are already debating whether existing statutes provide adequate standards or whether new legislation is needed. That conversation has a high probability of continuing regardless of this case's outcome. Justice systems only work when people believe they're fair, even when outcomes sting. This story isn't finished. It's still being written in courtrooms, in investigations, and in the court of public opinion, where Americans wrestle with what they believe about power and accountability. If you want to understand how prosecution decisions get made and what standards govern them, watch our next video, Inside the Prosecutor's Mind: How Charging Decisions Actually Work. It breaks down the invisible process that determines who faces charges and why, beyond the headlines and political noise. This script is based on publicly available information as of October 2025. Details continue to develop. Claims labeled as alleged remain unproven in court. We've synthesized reporting from multiple news sources and legal documents. This video presents facts and context, not legal advice or political advocacy. As always, critical thinking and multiple sources serve you best.